Hello everyone, this is Zflex and welcome back to another A Producer's Approach video. In this video we're going to be looking at Rameses B, Feint, and Veela's mega collab Space Boy. If you haven't watched my videos in the past, I basically break down these videos into 3 separate sections. First I have an intro backstory section, second I have a breakdown analysis section, then lastly I have an outro section. So Space Boy is a song that personally for me I've been waiting for a very long time. Rameses B and Feint have both worked with Veela in the past, but they've never collaborated really together on a song. They've remixed each other's songs where Veela was the vocalist, but they never collaborated together on a song, which is pretty interesting considering they're on similar record labels where they would be, possibly having the chance to collaborate with each other like on Liquidity and on Monstercat, but I guess the opportunity just never appeared until now. I'm just really glad that they also included Veela in this collab because, Rameses B and Feint by themselves are big enough artists, but Veela is kind of like the female vocalist that ties to both of these artists and just like the old school drum and bass when, it was starting to get popular on Monstercat. Like a lot of the big notable songs on Monstercat that are drum and bass usually have Veela as the vocalist. So it's just pretty cool how all 3 of them just created this mega collab, and this to me was probably a song I've been looking the most forward to for a very long time. I wasn't sure if it would actually happen. I know a lot of people in the comment sections over the years on the Monstercat videos, whether it be a Rameses B, Feint release or a song including Veela, they all said Rameses B, Feint collab should happen, and then maybe including Veela. But I know the Rameses B and Feint collab has been like thrown around the comment section for, oh man, I don't know, maybe at least 8-9 years now, ever since the early Monstercat days. So yeah, Rameses B is this artist I was introduced to on Monstercat through his song, I think Come and Go. I believe that was his first release. It was a house song, which was kind of unusual because he mostly did even drum and bass back then. Not so much house, but his first release on Monstercat was a house song, so it's interesting. And then Feint and Veela is the notable duo from Time Bomb on Monstercat. That's probably one of their more notable songs from the 007 Solace album, which is where all the iconic Monstercat songs pretty much are held on, like Disconnected, Time Bomb, Reasons, and some other notable songs. So it's pretty interesting how they finally in 2022 did a mega collab, which I'm pretty cool with because another mega collab that happened that I hope to review one day is the Mr. Fiji Ouija Direct and Cloud None mega collab, which those 3 are another 3 artists that people have been ranting and raving about in the comment section for them to collab. So it's pretty cool to see these mega collabs finally happening. Maybe more will come out this year, but for the 2 that already come out, I'm pretty happy, but I hope to see more in the future. So anyways, this is Rameses B, Feint, and Veela's song Space Boy, and let's get into this breakdown. Alright, so in the beginning, you hear Veela's vocals say, "Hey there, Space Boy." To me, that's the hook because that's actually what I remember the most about this song is just that intro verse of "Hey there, Space Boy." I kind of say that more recently after listening to the song, just randomly, just thinking about this song. But it's pretty cool. You hear the pluck happening in the very beginning, which is really cool, kind of sets the tone for the ambience. And then a little bit later on, there's this kind of like reverse sound that goes like with a lot of reverb and delay on it, which is a nice kind of VFX sound, playing into the same kind of timbre range, I guess, as the pluck sound to really build that kind of spacey atmosphere. Just in terms of styles, this reminds me a lot of Rameses B. A lot of his music is really kind of spacey and kind of that esque, and he can really kind of capture that space kind of vibe right off the bat. So just kind of from the beginning, I could tell that's a Rameses B kind of sound. There is a breakdown video on Rameses B's side for how this collab went down, and I'll link that in the description section. But I just wanted to point out, I think that was more of a Rameses B sound just to start off. But anyways, let's keep going.
Where do I start? I'm an emotional, taking in your sweet and considerate heart. Come into my world, give me your spark. Time to land and visit the planet. Give me your try. Still wanna make you sure I'm the reason to come back here. Just don't linger too much, 'cause you're a stranger, baby.
Alright, so there's more things that happen within this section. So there's like an ARP on the bottom to add more texture and tone, and kind of to establish some type of a bass line in this section while Veela's vocals are singing. And what I really do like about drum and bass is how they have the percussion start, but it's like really filtered quite a bit. So there's like a lot of the low ends cut out. So I guess you would say that's part of like a high pass filter. So basically they kind of filter a lot of the low end kick, and all you hear is the snare and the hi-hats playing, which is a very common technique for a lot of liquid drum and bass. I know Rameses B does that a lot too, but Feint does it really well in a lot of his drum and bass and liquid drum and bass songs. So just that technique within a lot of liquid drum and bass is really cool, where they kind of introduce the kind of like a drum loop or a hi-hat loop or percussion loop without any kicks, just like the snare and the hi-hat, and you just kind of hear it rolling like it was a regular drum loop. So it's just pretty interesting. I really like that aspect to it. Veela's vocals are great. The variation, the vocal is different than just saying, hey, there's Space Boy the whole time. So you can always expect that from Veela's vocals, and her vocals are just so angelic. It matches the whole vibe of Space Boy. So in terms of this section, I would say it's a little bit more towards Rameses B in terms of the structuring, but I know Feint has similar producing techniques as Rameses B in kind of building up in these kind of breakdown sections. So it's pretty interesting there. So anyways, let's keep going. All right, so that was the build-up. It was actually a lot faster than I expected it to be. It's interesting because like it's the kick that you hear, but it's like the top end of the kick. So it's just like I guess like when producing, like there's like a top kick, a mid kick, and a low kick in terms of when you want to structure your own kick. I'm just kind of developing that myself. I learned it back in the day, but I'm developing it more myself now. So you could use like a hi-hat for the top kick if you want, and then to get like the sub bass, you get like a lower kick, and then in the middle you want to get that kind of beef from the regular kind of punch of the kick. So if you structure it in that way, you kind of can hear that. And here you don't hear like the middle or the low end, you just hear the top end of that kick. So either you could filter the kick quite a bit with like a high pass filter, or you could just use like, I guess, a hi-hat or the top kick to just really kind of note that the kick is happening there. So I noticed that is happening, but it could be that there's a filter happening, because there's also like a filter, like a high-pass filter filtering out a lot of the other sounds as well in this kind of build-up section. There is a VFX sound happening, and then you hear the introduction of the lead sound, and from Rameses B's kind of breakdown video, that was a lead sound that Feint created. So I think the drop section is more geared towards more Feint style, where Rameses B did a little bit more of the introduction of the song. While their influence is both there for the whole song, like you could tell kind of which artist kind of structured which part of the song. So it's pretty interesting, and it's pretty cool here. It kind of builds up, then there's a VFX, and then I think there's going to be a vocal, Don't Be a Stranger Now, from Veela, and then it's just going to drop. So anyways, let's enjoy this first drop, and I'll get back to breaking down the song after. right, so that was the first part of the first drop. I was actually going to let the whole drop play out, but I want to first talk about the first part of the drop because it is different. So the first part of the drop is really cool. You hear the main lead sound playing along with the bass sound, the percussion's in a double time rhythm. So that's more of a traditional drum and bass rhythm. Kick on 1, snare on 2 and 4, and then the kick is kind of a little bit off on the third beat. So you have that more traditional drum and bass kind of double time rhythm. You have some hi-hats playing, which is really cool. What was introduced kind of in the section, in the build up section and break section. It could be the same percussion or it could be a little bit different, that build up and break. And I just wanted to note, I almost did hear piano sound playing along with the lead. But it was kind of hard for me to hear. But what was really cool is after you hear the vocal, Don't Be a Stranger Now, it kind of reverbs out with a lot of effects and the lowers. And then that sound or that vocal chop of like the reverb tail is actually looped in the background of this first section of the drop, which I didn't actually notice listening to the song before. So that's pretty interesting. It gives it a nice space in the background, as well as, you know, another pad playing in the background. But I noticed that kind of vocal kind of chop with the reverb and delay tail kind of being played in the background and kind of looped to give it some extra texture. So this is the second part of the first drop. We'll listen to this and then I'll break this part down because it changes a little bit. All right, so this second part of the drop, I would say is more of a Rameses B type drop. The first part is more of a Feint type drop. So the second part is what Rameses B does in a lot of his music, where he kind of vocal chops the vocals in the section, and then the bass line you hear a little bit more, and then the lead changes to a different sound. Is not really so present with the high-end sounds. Like, it's not like a really big kind of saw wave sounding sound. It's more like a pluck sound, which is really interesting. And then the nature of that section is a little more bouncy, I guess you'd say. There's a little bit more movement, and you hear the bass line a little bit more in this second part of the drop. So the first part of the drop, at least from my experience listening to Rameses B and Feint kind of structured the first part. The second part seems to have a little bit more Rameses B influence, because that sounds like a drop that he would have in his drum and bass music. So it's pretty interesting, and I like how they chopped Veela's vocals and they kind of changed the pitch for a lot of her vocals to go along with the chord progression, which is really cool. Really good technique, and overall just a really good first drop and just a really good representation of their style so far. So let's keep going. All right, so I just want to note in this section, just to kind of outro from that first drop into this break section. So Veela's vocals come back in. There's an ARP playing, and then there's that kind of fast percussion loop that you hear in like drum and bass. It goes da 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 da. Like, you hear that kind of fade out as well as that ARP fade out until now you hear Veela's vocals just by itself, playing along with, I think, a piano or a pad. So it just kind of fades out a little bit, which is really cool. It's like a nice transition. It's not really abrupt. It's just kind of subtle, and then it just kind of fades out. So to me, that's just like a really good transition for a song in general. It's not abrupt, and that's something I could learn to do in the future, to just kind of ease some of the sounds out into kind of a vocal heavy section. So anyways, let's keep going.
Every time you back up and leave in your car, why can't you stay here, soak up the charm, take a breather, I'm all you needed. Give me your heart, I wanna make you sure I'm the reason to rest up. Yeah, if you don't linger enough, you'll be a stranger, baby.
All right, that section's really cool. So Veela's vocals are playing. There is another kind of pad sound. Well, it's not really pad. It's kind of a pluck, but the pluck has like some pad kind of qualities to where it's kind of big feeling. And then it also has like a piano, almost like kind of attack to it. So like when the pluck hits, it almost sounds like a piano. Um, then Veela sings, and then the bass kind of comes in. I don't know whether it be like the sub bass or a bass kind of low end sound, mid bass sound paired with the sub bass coming in, but it's just not as deep or not as high in volume. And then you hear the percussion come back in again. That I want to call liquid drum and bass kind of type percussion comes back in, and then you hear the arp come back in this section. But I don't know, the way that Rameses B and Feint can just accentuate Veela's vocals. Those two are probably the masters of doing that with Veela's vocals. Not many artists can do it as well as Rameses B and Feint. It could just be from years of experience working with her vocals, that they just know how to accentuate her vocals. But in that section, like, you just, at least for me, I get the feels of the song, and the variation of Veela's vocals in this section is different than in the first break section. So it's kind of nice variation with their vocals, and it just kind of hits home with that emotional feeling of being in space like that. I don't know, it just gives me like the emotional vibe and chills like every single time I hear that section. So anyways, this is going to be the build-up section. I think it's a little bit more exaggerated than the last one, so let's check it out. All right, so it's a little bit more exaggerated this time. There's claps this time instead of like that high end kind of kick, the top kick. And then there's another arp playing this time, which is really cool. It changes the kind of structure and buildup of the buildups themselves between the first buildup and the second buildup, so that's really cool. And then it kind of stops. I didn't really hear VFX as much this time. There might have been this, like, maybe a really fast VFX, or maybe it's low in volume to where I didn't really notice it, but it kind of built up a little bit. I didn't hear as much filtering, but maybe there was. And then it kind of pitches down with this VFX. It goes pew, kind of like turning the TV off or something. It sounds like you're turning the TV off or a radio off, which is really interesting. Or tuning a radio. That might be what it sounds like. And that's really cool. So the transition is a little bit different than the first transition to the first drop. So anyways, we will get into this second drop here. And I believe the rhythm is in halftime to start off this drop, but let's see.
Be a stranger now.
All right, so that drop was in halftime, as I said. Start off into the drop. You have Veela's vocals say "Don't Be a Stranger" now, but it's interesting because there's like another vocoded layer on the bottom of the vocals, which is really nice. Kind of gives it like a harmony. Then you get into the drop, which is pretty similar to like the structure of the first drop, other than the percussion. So it's in a halftime rhythm, kick on 1, snare on 3, you got the hi-hats. And when it's in a halftime rhythm, you hear a lot more of the other sounds because there's not as much percussion happening. So you hear the lead a bit more and you hear the bass line a bit more. And what I really like in this section is what they did with Veela's vocals. She has these vocals that are harmonizing, oh ha, but it's really cool because they're vocoded. And then they have one layer of the vocals in the regular pitch, and then they have a vocoded vocal in another layer that's a little bit off pitch, but still like within the same kind of key and chordal structure, I guess you'd say. So like I just like how the vocal itself is vocoded, but the second vocal, like you could tell it's a lot more vocoded, but it's harmonizing with that vocoded vocal that's harmonizing with the kind of lead and just the pads and the bass line, everything there. So it's just really cool. I just like that vocal harmonization with like the vocoded vocals there. Like it's really a nice technique, and that's something I feel like Rameses B and Feint can only really pull off in a drum and bass song. So they really know how to, you know, half time these songs and use Veela's vocals to the best of their ability, especially in this drop with even vocoding them a little bit. So anyways, this is the transition into the second part of the drop, and I think it outros after that. Alright, that is Rameses B, Feint, and Veela song Space Boy. So we'll back up a little bit. So the second part of the second drop is pretty similar to the end of the second part of the first drop. Same structure, switches back to a double time rhythm, and the art or lead that changes is still pretty much the same. And then I like how the vocals come in for Veela saying, now you'll see me in the dark and I want you. And then it's like kind of pitched up a little bit, which is really cool. I don't remember if it was exactly quite like that in the end of the first drop, but it might be the same kind of vocal pitched in the same way. And then they just kind of end it with the lead sound. And then there's no like percussion really that kind of comes in to end it. It's just kind of like, it just kind of ends with a little bit of a VFX, and you really hear that like reverb and delay tail just outroing the song. So anyways, this is Space Boy, and this is probably the best representation of all three artists, Rameses B, Feint, and Veela. If they were to ever make a mega collab, this is the song. And I can't tell you how much I really like this song. Like, once I saw that they were going to release a song, I knew it was going to be an instant classic, and it already is. Like, I can't express the amount of, you know, joy I get when listening to this song and just how much I like this song. And if you guys want to see a little bit more, Rameses B did kind of a breakdown video on his own channel, and I'll link it in the description of him talking about how he and Feint created the song and kind of the expectations they had to live up to for this song, because they even knew that this was a big collab and they had to get it right for the fans that have been wanting this for so long. So overall, this song is great. You really get the representation of Rameses B's style, Feint's style, and Veela's vocals. I love Veela's vocals in, you know, most songs, but especially when she's working with Rameses B or Feint or both, it's just like amazing. Feint is a really good drum and bass artist. His style is a little bit different. He uses a lot more sounds that use a lot more high end in his synths and bass lines, and Rameses B sometimes does that. He uses super sauce, but then he also uses more like almost organic sounds, and he has more kind of bouncier basses. I don't really know how to explain it, but these three are, you know, the mega collab, I would say, for the year for me. They even outbeat the Feej one, which is, I thought, was amazingly hard to beat out, but this beats out quite a few mega collabs that I've even seen over the years. And, you know, the vocals are great in the song. The lead sounds are great. The, like, just going from the beginning, the introduction of Veela's vocals right off the bat paired with the plucks to just kind of build up the ambience in the very beginning is really cool. The liquid drum and bass kind of percussion, I always love that in liquid drum and bass, but you hear it more in liquid drum and bass. In the drop section itself, I really like the lead section in the very first part of the drop pairing with the bass, and I like how that was really influenced by Feint. You could tell in that section. The second part of the drop was really influenced by Rameses B, and they still included the vocal kind of reverb chop tail in the first drop, in that very first part, kind of in the background to give, you know, use to the vocals from Veela. And then I like that break section where they kind of taper off some of the synths and then go into just the straight vocal. paired with the kind of pluckish piano paddish sound. But the vocal starts and then like those synths just kind of fade out, which is nice. Then it gives way more emphasis on the vocals. And then after that, I like how they reintroduced some of the sounds, exaggerated the second drop a bit. And then that halftime drop. I just love the halftime drops in general in drum and bass. I do that quite a bit in my own music. It just gives nice variation. You hear a lot more of the like bass sounds and the lead sounds when there's a little bit less percussion going on. And I just love how they vocoded Veela's vocals in this section, and they harmonized her vocoded vocals with the drop section, with the lead and the bass sounds, and just the flow of it all is really good, and just how it outros with the double time and then with the reverb tails and all that. So overall, this is just an amazing song. I don't know what else I could say other than maybe watch Rameses B's video for how they made the song. But this is a mega collab, I would say, that lived up to the hype. And there are a lot of mega collabs that are on Monstercat, like Muzzy, Feint, and Coven, and Conroe, Grant, and Anevo. But I think this one might even be better than the Muzzy, Coven, and Feint collab. Like, I think this is like truly like this might be like the big mega collab for me that I really like out of like the 3 artist mega collabs. So that says something for these 3 artists. And you know, my buddy Earth Fox is also a really big fan of Veela, as well as Rameses B and Feint. And then my buddy Aram is also a big fan of Rameses B and Feint as well. So a lot of my friends are also like, if they know EDM, they know Rameses B, Feint, and Veela. Well, maybe not so much Veela, but at least Rameses B and Feint. So like those 2 are pretty notable, I would say, in more of the EDM side, drum and bass side of things. So anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Like, comment, subscribe. That really does help the channel. And I hope you guys enjoy this mega collab. Check out Rameses B's music, Feint's music, and Veela's music. Check out all their collabs, like Feint and Veela together, Rameses B and Veela together, or their remixes. But just check out their individual music as well. They really have really good songs just on their own as well. So anyways, I'll see you guys in the next A Producer's Approach video. Have a good one, everyone. Peace.